back to my channel. So for this video I thought it'd be fun to quickly go through all of the books that I've read so far in 2025. This year, unfortunately, has not been the best reading year for me. It is already the middle of April and I believe I've read around 11 books, and still 11 is a lot of books. But there were years where I would have read over 20 already, but that's fine. So I'll just give you a brief summary and my thoughts on all of the books that I've read so far. And I'm just going to start out with the very first book that I finished this year. The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. This is a book that I read for my Patreon book club and I did not expect to love this book so much. So basically this book follows a famous children's book author who has an unpublished manuscript, and he is going to organize a competition for his fans to enter in, and the one fan who wins the competition wins this unpublished manuscript of his newest book. This is not only about the competition but also about the personal issues that all the contestants are struggling with, and we follow our main character Lucy, who is participating in this competition for a very different reason than just getting the manuscript. This was an amazing start to the year because I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and as I said, I did not expect to love it this much. I didn't really know much about this book, so I definitely picked it up on a whim. It was incredibly whimsical. I loved the kind of magical realism-ish vibes to it, and our main character Lucy was very likable and easy to root for, which I always really enjoy in books. Sometimes you have an amazing plot but just none of the characters are very likable, and in this book the characters were definitely very likable and you were really rooting for them. I think this one is a great book if you want to get yourself out of a reading slump and, you know, read a quick, easy and very fun and exciting and whimsical book, so highly recommend this one. The next book is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I finally read this book. This had been on my shelf for years already. This is one of these classic gothic books, and it follows a young woman who marries a widow and then moves into his very grand mansion. But in that mansion, kind of the spirit of his ex-wife who passed away is still lingering there, and Rebecca, the ex-wife, just feels present in this mansion and in the lives of, you know, our main character. This was incredibly atmospheric and mysterious, which I really loved. It did take me some time to get into it, but in the end I decided to give it 4.25 out of 5 stars because it definitely sucked me in after a while. The one thing that I sometimes felt like it was a bit too much was all the setting descriptions. Sometimes I can't be bothered about what a pathway looks like, and even though I would like to get more into these kind of slower books, I feel like my mind and my concentration for the past couple of years is just so busy, and I don't really have that much concentration to focus on these slower books, hence why it took me some time to get into it. But I'm trying to embrace it more, these, you know, very elaborate descriptions of things, and just really take it all in. But I'm trying to get into that more, to really just take my time with reading books like this, because I'm just a very rushed person in general, but it's something I'm working on. So that's why I really enjoyed reading this one, to kind of help myself with this thing that I'm struggling with sometimes. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was mysterious, it was quite dark, and it's definitely up there with some of my favorite gothic reads. The next one we have is one that I was so excited to read. This is an author by author for me, and it is Eliza Clark's newest book, She's Always Hungry. This is a short story collection. Look at how creepy the cover looks. And this is a very dark, and I mean dark, short story collection. All of her other books, Boy Pass and Penance, were also very dark, very twisted, but this one just stepped it up a notch. Okay, I don't know where to start. There were quite a few stories in there. I think over 10 stories. On the back it says, for example, a teenager longs for perfect skin. A scientist tends to fragile alien flora. A young man takes the night into his own hands. There are 11 surreal, troubling, and frankly gross little worlds. It was about obsession, it was about fame, violence. All the twisted things that you can think of were in this book, and if you are interested in reading this book but want to know about some trigger warnings, there is a really great trigger warning guide in this book as well. Every single story, they tell you about the trigger warnings that you can expect, which I thought was a really, you know, great addition to this book. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's because I didn't love every single one of the stories, but there were a few stories in there where I was just like, oh my goodness, Eliza Clark, where is your mind going? What are you thinking? How are you coming up with this? And they were very twisted and dark, and I loved it. So every single book that she writes, I will definitely read, because I love all of her books, and I highly recommend all 3 of them. I read a very, very short book because I was craving some Oscar Wilde, so I decided to read Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast. This is one of these Penguin little black classics, and this one is just full of quotes and little sayings and little sentences about or like written by Oscar Wilde and about his thoughts. I also underlined quite a few. I wrote lol. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. And then I put lol. To do nothing at all is the most difficult thing in the world. The most difficult and the most intellectual. The aim in life is self-development, to realize one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Or one can live for years, sometimes without living at all, and then all life comes crowding into one single hour. All of these little like sentences, and I loved it. It says, to love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. Love it. So yeah, full of his witty, interesting thoughts about life. And sometimes Oscar Wilde can be a little bit over the top, but that is what I really like about him, and hence why he's one of my favorite authors. It was just very funny, sometimes quite inspiring as well, and just extremely quick to get through. Then I listened to The Safekeep by Jaël van der Woude. This is her debut novel. It's a historical fiction that follows a family just after the Second World War, in which the sister-in-law is moving into their house. So her brother's fiance is moving in, and things are happening. The 2 women, they start to get to know each other, and like things are unfolding. There's very deep emotional like bonds happening, and yeah, lots of secrets are kind of unfolding as well. This book was so beautifully written. It felt so intimate, like I was really being sucked into these people's lives. It felt so real and raw, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. For a debut novel, this was phenomenal. And historical fictions are always one of my favorite books to read. This one was post-World War II, which I always find a very interesting era as well. So this was just, yeah, absolutely amazing. Highly recommend this book, and I'm very curious what Jaël van der Woude is coming up with next, because this was phenomenal, and I already heard that she sold it in many different countries. It's going to be translated. Yeah, she has done very well with this debut novel. Then I listened to a memoir called Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. You may know her from the Duggar family, which is this very, very large family that has, I believe, over 19 kids. It was a TV show on TLC, but then lots of things went down in that family that were not very nice, to say the least. And this is where Jill, I believe she's the eldest daughter, she's kind of opening up about what it was like living in this family and how maybe some of her values have changed over the years. And even though her and I are so completely different in the way that we want to live our lives, in our beliefs, in our values, I still think it's like very interesting to read and learn about people's lives that are very different from my own life. Hence why I quite enjoyed this book. Like I find it difficult to rate these type of memoirs, but I thought it was very good, and I always appreciate it if people are very open and honest about their lives. And she was very open about all of the emotional pain that she has, you know, dealt with over the years and is probably still dealing with. So I thought this one was really good, and I always watched that show like years and years ago when it was still on TLC. So learning all about that family was very, very interesting. Then we are going into February. The first book I read in February is Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal, written by Jeanette Winterson. This is another memoir, and Jeanette Winterson is the author of Christmas Days. Christmas Days is my new favorite Christmas book. It is a book full of short stories, fictional and non-fiction, about Jeanette Winterson and her life and her Christmas traditions, her friends, her family, and also some fictional, festive, magical stories. I love that book. I picked it up on a whim a couple of years ago, and I now reread it every single year during Christmas. But because I loved the non-fiction stories in that Christmas Days book the most, I decided to also pick up her memoir. Jeanette Winterson has been through a lot when she was younger. She grew up in a very strict religious household. She was struggling with her sexuality, and she was like trying to figure out who she was while dealing with a lot of emotional pain. This was definitely quite a tough book to read. It was like very heavy at times, but it also felt so inspiring, and seeing how strong she was and how resilient above all. So I loved this memoir so much. She has also written a novel called Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, and that one is inspired by her own life. So in this book, I don't know whether I want to read that book, because I heard that it is quite similar to what everything that's mentioned in here about her real life compared to the fiction novel that it was inspired by. But if you guys think that I should read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, definitely let me know in the comments, because I might pick it up. I would still love to learn more about her and read more of her work. So if you've got any recommendations on which book I should read, let me know in the comments. But this was an amazing memoir, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I finally read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. If you like intense and kind of messy characters with lots of drama, this is definitely a book for you. The characters are kind of unhinged, but in the best way. It follows a kind of revenge/toxic love story between these two characters, and yeah, I was hoping I'd enjoy it more. I was hoping I was going to love it, obviously, but I didn't. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and the reason is that it like took me some time to get into this book, and unfortunately I didn't really like the narration style of this book. I was hoping that it would just be narrated or being like from the point of view of the main characters, but it was from the point of view of side characters, which was quite interesting, because sometimes they could have like they were a little bit unreliable when it comes to how they perceived the story between like the love interests in this book. But I still often like to read from the point of view of the main characters. I did really enjoy the plot, and even though I already knew about a couple of things that were going to happen in this book, I just enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite, unfortunately. And I read that quite a few people think the same about this when I read some of the reviews after reading it. Yeah, I love the Kate Bush song though. Next, it was time for another reread, namely Wintering by Catherine May. I have decided to try to reread this book every single winter. This is a non-fiction book, and this is all about the power of rest and retreat in difficult times. This is kind of a really soothing and calming book about why it's important to sometimes take it slow during difficult times, like maybe for yourself when you're having a difficult time, or when it's literally getting colder and darker during the winter months. Catherine May talks about her own experiences with burnout, with depression, and she kind of combines this with stories from other people who live sometimes in very cold climates where it gets super cold during the winter months, and how they deal with it, as well as just the nature around her and how nature deals with these really cold winter months when times literally get dark. It's definitely one of those books that kind of make you feel seen, because everyone is sometimes going through times in their lives where they are feeling not the best, and a book like this can really help with that, to kind of, as I said, make you feel seen and make you feel understood in how you're feeling. So I really enjoyed this one. I think the second time around when I read it now, I enjoyed it more than the first time I read it, which is so great. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I did feel like something was missing, or that the story kind of felt like a bunch of small stories not really woven together like logically or something, but I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was very beautiful and inspiring. Then we are going into March, another reread for me, namely The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is one of my favorite books. It has been since I first read it, I believe 10 years ago. I think it was 2015. Then I think I reread it a year or two later, so it has been a long time since I last read it, probably at least 7 years, maybe 8 years, and I was interested to see if it was still going to be one of my favorite books, and it is. It is a magical realism book about a magical circus that appears in the night without any notice. People go to that circus to be completely mesmerized, to be completely like taken out of the regular world, being put in the circus and just, you know, enjoying and experiencing everything around them. And the main kind of story in this book is about a competition between 2 magicians. The story kind of jumps around in time and has a bunch of different perspectives, which I absolutely loved. At first I really had to get into that and really focus on, okay, now we are in this time and we're following these characters, to kind of make it make sense in my head, you know, when the time, or like when the story was taking place. But whilst rereading it, it helped me a lot because I already read it before, and it was just so incredibly atmospheric and beautiful and whimsical, hence why it's still one of my favorite books, and I'm just very happy that I reread it. So yeah, if you're looking for a beautiful and whimsical story that's magical as well, this one is definitely it. I love Erin Morgenstern. I have 2 more books to talk about. First of all, of course, I read Sunrise on the Reaping, the newest Hunger Games novel that follows Hamish Abernathy during his Hunger Games. I believe it was the 25th Hunger Games. And it is another quarter quell, so the special thing about these Hunger Games is that they have double the amount of people entering the games, and this one is all about Hamish. Hamish was already like always one of my favorite characters, so having a story about his past and about his time during the Hunger Games was just phenomenal, and I loved it. Spoiler alert. Like, I read it a few weeks ago and I kept thinking about it a little bit more, and I did kind of realize a little bit later, like, okay, this kind of feels like just another Hunger Games book, because it does feel very similar to the original trilogy. We already knew what was going to happen, and there were definitely some things in there that, you know, we've read about before. However, the whole backstory of Hamish and some things that he said, the way he's acting, my heart, I couldn't handle it at times. And I still absolutely loved it. So she is definitely reusing some ideas, which I'm totally fine with because I love the Hunger Games too. But yeah, it wasn't so super new in my opinion, but I still absolutely loved it. And I mean, if she gives us a story about Finnick, I would read it too. Amazing. I can't wait for the film. And the last book that I read this year so far was also in... Oh no, this was in April. I finished 1 book in April so far, namely The Coworker by Frida McFadden. This is a thriller book, and I usually never really read thrillers. However, last year I read The Housemaid, this one by Frida McFadden, and I really loved it. Like, who am I? Am I suddenly turning into a thriller girl? I don't know. But this book follows 2 women who work in an office. Our main character, Natalie, and then her colleague, Dawn. And Dawn suddenly disappears. However, Dawn is normally always exactly on time. In the office, she goes to the bathroom at the same time, she has lunch at the same time, and she leaves the office at the same time, and suddenly she is gone. What is happening? What has happened to Dawn? And, you know, how is Natalie dealing with this? I really enjoyed this book because the more we read about Dawn, the more we figured out some of her personality traits and the way she perceives things, the way she's very strict with things in her life, and the way she's very obsessed with particular things and items, which I thought was very interesting. And I enjoyed this book. It was not my favorite Frida McFadden book, even though I've only read 2 so far, but I felt like the plot twist in this book was a little bit less exciting than the one in The Housemaid, hence why I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. But I got this one in England last week. It was at The Works, this really cheap bookstore, so it was only a couple of pounds, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to pick it up and see what I think of it. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. If there is another Frida McFadden book that you think I should read, definitely let me know in the comments. I'm actually editing this video as we speak, but I realized that I actually forgot to mention 2 books because I filmed this video like a week ago, and in the meantime I finished 2 more books, so I thought I would quickly talk to you about them too. First of all, I finally finished The Square of Sevens by Laura Shepherd Robinson. I'd been reading this book for weeks and I finally read it. It's a story about a girl named Red. She's a fortune teller and she lives in London and in Bath. She kind of moves between the 2. And after her father passes away, she really wants to find out more about her family. Who was her mother? Who was her father? And she's using fortune telling to do that. She's also trying to learn more about this particular family that may have been her family as well, and kind of infiltrating that family and trying to find out more information. And I finally finished it. It took me a while to read it. It was quite big. There was some times where I was really into this book and others where it's kind of losing it a little bit. And in my opinion, it was just a little bit too long and it was sometimes dragging a bit, but the story itself was really good and the plot twists in there were immaculate. So I decided to give this like 4 out of 5 stars. It's a great read. It's just a little bit too long in my opinion. And then the last book that I literally finished an hour ago is Bob Dylan's memoir called Chronicles Volume 1. I always love reading memoirs, especially by interesting artists, musicians, and I was really excited to read this book, but unfortunately it let me down quite a bit. The thing is, you can really feel his passion for his music, for lyrics specifically, and also the way this book was written. It was written quite lyrically, very beautiful, very poetic. But the thing is, this book was just about all of his like songs and when he was singing what, where, all of these people that I don't know those people, I don't recognize their names. There were a couple of people in there who I did recognize, but it was literally just about, oh, and then at that moment in my life, I wrote this song, and then I wrote this song, and then I came up with this lyric, and honestly, it was just a little bit boring. So yeah, this was not really my favorite memoir. I am gonna give it like, I don't know, maybe 3 out of 5 stars, 2.5 out of 5 stars. It definitely wasn't bad, and I really like his writing style, his way of using words, but it was just a little bit boring. And I was hoping for it to be a bit more like Life by Keith Richards or Just Kids by Patti Smith, but honestly not a lot was happening in here. He didn't really talk about his relationships. It was just about his musical career, which of course makes sense, but yeah, definitely missing something. But those were the final 2 books in my wrap-up for this year so far. So these were all of the books that I have read so far this year. I am very excited about the books that I have read, but I really hope that for the next part of the year my reading mood will kind of get a bit better, and just like, it's my mind. I'm finding it very difficult to really just sit down and read my book for like an hour and really focus on that. Just, yeah, my mind is busy. And even though at the beginning of this year I did like a 31-day social media detox, I deleted my Instagram, which was great. The moment I downloaded it again, it was just back. Oh. Why do I find it so difficult to just relax and focus on my book instead of going on my bloody phone? But I'm excited to work on that for the next part of the year, especially now that summer is, it's getting here, it's getting sunnier, spring is most definitely here. I can't wait to just go outside and read my book in the park and really focus on the book and not on my phone. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know in the comments the best book that you have read so far this year. My favorite book was actually the first book I read this year, The Wishing Game. If you want to comment something but you don't know what to comment, comment a sunflower emoji, because it's spring and sunflowers are my favorite flowers, so make the comment section look very yellow, full of sunflowers. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in my next one.